because both our regular party liners, or should I say neither of them, are available to us this morning. So we thought we'd do something slightly different, and it's always good when we do this, and that is we'll go to the serving representatives who are there in Canberra on your behalf, of course, with a Victorian flavour. So Keith Wallahan is here, Liberal member for Menzies and the Deputy Chair of the Joint Select Committee on the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Voice Referendum. And we've spoken to Mr Wallahan on a number of occasions. Keith, good to see you. Good morning.
You too, Virginia. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. And unfortunately, Dr Burke is coming in for some arts announcements in the electorate at 10:30. Michelle, good to have you on board as well. Good morning.
Morning, Virginia. Morning, Keith.
Can you share with us the announcements before we go anywhere?
I don't think so, Virginia. It doesn't work that way.
I thought I'd try.
You can text me, Michelle. I won't tell anyone.
Yeah, exactly. He won't. The arts being a particular interest of mine, I think we could do something interesting with it on air. But all right, we'll leave it till 10:30. A lot to get through, and I'd like your suggestions and nominations for what you think our serving politicians should be talking about this morning, or some direct questions for them. 1300 222 774 is the number. Michelle Ananda-Rajah, is there still yet a fair bit to play out on the robo-debt scandal?
Yeah, look, robo-debt, I think we're still reeling from that report that was handed down last Friday. But robo-debt was state-sanctioned cruelty against some of the weakest people in our community. And there's a lot more to come. It was a weighty report, over 1,300 pages long, 57 recommendations. But I really feel for the victims. They are so traumatized from this, and some of them self-harmed, and worse things happened. But what we really want to see now is the beginning of justice. I think this is the beginning, and there's still a long way to go.
Keith Wallahan, what would justice look like for you, for the victims of robo-debt?
I think the first thing is to acknowledge what happened, and part of that is the report, but the other part is hearing from people like me who are Liberals. And can I clearly say to your listeners that it was a shameful failure of governance, and it was also illiberal. One of the reasons I'm a Liberal is because we respect the dignity of an individual, and instead we had a computer algorithm reverse the onus on accusing innocent people of being guilty of something they weren't. And the scale was enormous. 500,000 people were affected. I knew many of them. I acted for one pro bono as a barrister quite early on. And
so this was in the early days of robo-debt when you were still working in the law.
Yeah, I did. And it was becoming quite clear early on that the scale of this and the errors were more than isolated. And it was really quite disturbing. I mean, members of the Liberal Party were affected that I know. So, and I think it's important for us to learn the lessons from this, and it starts with acknowledging the pain. And one of the key lessons I think we'll all have to deal with is the role of automising governance, that there should always be a person in the chain that has oversight over how things are conducted. And as AI becomes more a part of our life, I think that's something as regulators we need to turn our mind to.
Michelle Ananda-Rajah, you're at a disadvantage just because you're not in the room, and this is a very rollicking backwards and forwards conversation. So as you want to leap in, please do. And
Can I just say
you.
something about AI, Virginia?
Yeah.
I actually was a researcher before I came into politics, and I was a finalist, a Research Australia finalist for my work on AI, and I was a grant reviewer for AI as well for the MRFF. So I know something about AI. I know it intimately, and there is this risk with AI. You must always have the humans on the driver's wheel, on the steering wheel, because AI is basically a mathematical model, and the quality of the AI is very much dependent on the data that is inputted, because these models are trained usually on vast amounts of data.
Yes.
And they are highly, highly prone to bias. And the problem with bias is that bias then gets amplified over millions of people. And I think this is what has happened here. Errors were made early on. This model was deployed prematurely, and then the harm started. So, AI is coming into our lives, but we need to be well aware of what the limitations are with these algorithms.
I don't want to be snaky with both of you, Keith Wallahan and Dr. Michelle Ananda-Rajah, but hey, I guess that's bipartisan. But there were humans in the chain. There were humans, as you've acknowledged, Keith, direct people who came to you and said, this is wrong, this is a problem. There were victims of robo-debt for months, if not years, who were standing up publicly and saying, I don't owe this money, I can't pay this debt, this sudden requirement to give them money is killing me. My question is, putting the AI to one side, because there clearly were human beings who were speaking up and acknowledging the reality of it, why weren't human beings listened to?
It's a good point.
Why don't we listen to certain people in the community? And that's where I think maybe the bias comes in, where when you're talking about a welfare recipient, they're not to be taken at face value and they're not to be believed immediately.
It's a good point. And it's not just enough to have a human in the decision-making process. It must be someone who's actually paying attention, someone who's competent, who's fair and who's compassionate, particularly when people are involved, and particularly where you're making accusations against people that for many saw their lives highly traumatised and some lose their lives. So it's about not just having a human, but them actually doing their job.
What about the public service?
I think, I just wanted to comment
Michelle.
on that, Virginia. So I think the other thing to keep in mind here is that ministerial action or sometimes inaction has far-reaching consequences. We've seen that with robo-debt. But what we need is a better support system for our ministers and for their decision-making. And that support system is the Australian Public Service.
Yes,
and what we've
that's
seen
where I was
over the
going
last,
with that.
Absolutely. And what we've seen over the last decade has been a undermining and a hollowing out of the APS. And I think robo-debt is actually a system failure. So it's not just one thing that has gone wrong. It's multiple things around a chain of command that has gone wrong here that we now need to address. And one of the key things that we're putting forward now as a government are amendments to the Public Services Act. This is based on the 30 review of the public service, and we want to restore culture, capability and integrity to the public service. And that is the purpose of the Act, of the changes we're making.
Keith Wallahan, when you came into Parliament, then the robo-debt system was still in operation, I imagine. Just trying to line that.
No, it wasn't.
It had ceased by then?
Yeah, it had.
Okay, right. Because I was just wondering what you did with that knowledge when you of dealing for clients, what you did with it when you came into Parliament, knowing exactly how that scheme had badly affected people.
No, it had ended, but the scheme had ended by then. It gave me a sense of perspective. We all bring our experiences to politics, and I've had various experiences in the army as a barrister. But
you served 3 terms in Afghanistan. I
did, yeah.
Yes.
But all of our experiences inform us, and to have seen, I heard this particular person, highly traumatized and in tears as to what it meant for their self and their honesty, that their honesty was being questioned by the government. And this was an extremely decent, honest person, as I'm sure almost all of these people were. So that perspective was very important for how I conduct myself going forward.
Now, are we team Paul Keating or not team Paul Keating when it comes to the NATO summit, to NATO and its ambitions generally, and our connection with it? Michelle?
Look, on the topic of Paul Keating, I haven't actually read anything that he has said. The reason being
I'm sure
is
you've
that
heard
I have
it.
a huge, I've heard a bit of it, but the reason is I have a huge volume of material I have to read, and I prioritise it based on
You are
importance.
ducking the question.
And he did not make the cut. I'm sorry, but look, from the point of NATO, NATO is a really important forum. This is the second time in just over the year the Prime Minister has been invited to this forum. And he's there to really strengthen our international alliances, which are really important for our national security, for trade, for commerce, and for the energy transition. But, I just find it interesting looking at how warmly the Prime Minister has been welcomed on this international stage. And I contrast it with the previous Prime Minister, who seemed to be wandering around looking for a friend at the last conference that he attended, which I think was one of the COPs. But, the important thing here also is that the ticket to the show has actually been climate diplomacy. All the work we've done on climate has meant that Australia, the laggard, has now come in as a prodigal child back to the fold. And this is what has been the ticket to the show. So it's great to see the Prime Minister, mixing with these people and doing business on behalf of the national interest.
Is it meaningful for you, Keith Wallahan?
It is, but I think we can overemphasise the show part of all of this. That there is a serious war in the European continent, as serious since World War II, And there's a temptation to say, well, that's somewhere else, and that doesn't matter to us. But of course it does. The 500 days of the defence of the homeland by the Ukrainian people has been extraordinary. And that has sent a signal to other autocracies, potentially in our region, who may think twice about conducting aggressive acts. So what happens in Ukraine matters to the world, and it matters to us. And we have always had a strong relationship with NATO. I was part of a NATO chain of command when I worked in Afghanistan. We were the third largest contributor for special forces in NATO in Afghanistan. And also NATO has been conducting dialogues in the region with Japan, South Korea, New Zealand and Australia. So I hope in this conference the Prime Minister encourages that sort of dialogue to continue.
I was speaking to the Ukrainian ambassador this morning on the program. He got a little bit snippy with me when I raised with him whether he was personally comfortable with Ukraine receiving cluster bombs from the United States for deployment there. What's your feeling of that? As someone who has served and someone who's seen the efficacy of some armaments and then the problematic nature of others, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm uncomfortable with the idea of cluster bombs, and whether it's the war crimes allegations from Afghanistan or anywhere else, I think we should set higher standards for ourselves, and what others do is for them. And I think because they have the potential to be indiscriminate, I'm
you've
concerned.
dealt with the consequences of IEDs, for example.
Well, that's right, and there's a lot of Australians on the War Memorial who lost their lives because of IEDs, and there's a lot who are alive because Bushmasters saved their lives. So I think on the one hand, we're providing a bit of equipment that will save Ukrainian lives from indiscriminate weapons. But I am concerned. I think there should be a moral high ground wherever you can with democracies on how you conduct yourself in a war.
Keith Wallahan, Michelle and Nandaraja are with you for the party line today. Cheryl's called in from Q East. Hi, Cheryl. What would you like to say?
Oh, hi, Virginia. Hi, Michelle. Hi,
Keith.
Forgotten the name of
That's
Keith.
all right.
Hi, sorry.
Hi, Cheryl.
Look, I just wanted to make a comment about Robodebt. It's absolutely unforgivable what these coalition ministers did. However, I think we need to look at ourselves as a society because I think some of our attitudes, our collective attitudes, almost give permission for this sort of demonisation, this psyche where we demonise people on social security. I mean, the comments in certain sections of society, certain sections of the media where we demonise people who are unemployed, we demonise sole parents. I think we as a society to some degree are culpable, and I've got no idea where this started, but it's something that's been going on for decades. And
yeah.
I think it's terrible that people now throw up their arms in horror and say, oh, what a disgrace, isn't this terrible? It's all about individuals. Yes, it is about individuals, and they use that trope for their political purposes.
Yes.
But I think it's societal.
So, Cheryl, I think it's a really good point. Michelle?
I completely agree. I think for too long we have demonized the most weak people, most vulnerable people in our community, and going after people on social security is just, they're a soft target. And instead of demonizing them, we need to humanize them. It's perfectly fine to be on social security. The Australian people have every right to be on social security when they need to. People fall on hard times. It happens due to job loss, due to relationship breakdown, due to bereavement. These things happen. They are the curved balls in life. And what you want in a society like ours, in a wealthy country like ours, one of the wealthiest countries in the world actually, is a safety net that will catch you if you fall. And the idea of having a safety net is that it's designed to stop you from sliding further and further into disadvantage, to stop you from spinning your wheels, so that you can get traction, you can get the mental health support you need, or you can get the counselling you need, or whatever other types of support you need to get back into the community and participate fully. So I completely agree with Cheryl. We need to stop this constant tearing down of people on social security and actually see them as humans with every right to be on the social security net, which, by the way, has been blown apart, I think, over the last decade.
Andrew in Berwick, I wanted to hear from you as well. Go ahead, Andrew.
Good morning. Yes, I'd like to touch on the hollowing out of the public service.
Yeah.
Within Defence, the contractors now represent both Defence and the sellers of defence equipment. So they're actually selling to themselves. And we've had the expected breakdown in diligence, and the system has now got to the point of defence is losing control over their own procurement and their own expenditure. And we're losing defence capability in gouging excess commissions. And it's got well and truly into the many billions of dollars.
Let's hear from Keith Wallahan on that. Thanks, Andrew. Go ahead, Keith.
Thank you, Andrew. That's a timely observation, particularly from what we've seen with PricewaterhouseCoopers. I think, look, there's no question that there has been more contracting for government services in the last 10 years. And I think that comes with risk, and it comes with risk in terms of conflict of interest. And there's no more important check on conflict of interest than in our defence contracting. We're also seeing an expansion of the Australian Defence Force, so there will be more contracts with many zeros attached to those.
Right.
I'm a big supporter of the National Anti-Corruption Commission, and I think the oversight that the NAC will have in defence contracting is very important, and I do welcome that.
How lacking in...
Can I just say something, Virginia?
Let me just clarify something with Keith, and then I'll come to you, Michelle. But I wanted to say, I mean, you clearly seem to be supporting there, Keith, the idea of fewer contracts and more reliance on an informed and skilled public service. But how much of a forlorn hope is that when it comes to salaries offered and also the experience that, you know, Michelle mentioned before has been hollowed out of the service?
Well, it's a tight labour market, so obviously you've got to offer competitive salaries in order to attract the best people. And often, you know, there is a temptation to contract out to save money, but when I've met some of the people who've been doing contract work for government, I can't see where the saving is. Like, there's almost a pyramid scheme in terms of the partner at a particular consulting firm getting their cut, then the junior associate, then the graduate who actually does the work. So I sometimes wonder if we're actually saving money when we do those contracts. But look, we do want the best people in the best jobs, and if you have to pay for that, so be it.
Michelle?
I want to speak about institutional knowledge and institutional memory, which is relevant not only to the comments made around defence procurement, but also to robo-debt. And I think that when we have workers who are happy, and you don't have that constant churn of staff through the APS, through the public service, you can then actually start to build up institutional memory and capability. And that is so important, because that is worth, you know, that you can't put a dollar amount on that kind of capability. And I came from medicine, where people stayed in their jobs for decades. I was in my one job for 13 years. Why? Because I loved it. And what happens over that time is that it leads to a growth of a layer of people who are highly skilled, highly knowledgeable, who then foster the next generation, and then the next generation after that. And then other things start to spin off, like research, for example, or public health, or so on and so forth. So that's the kind of flourishing we want to see now in the public service. And it starts by retaining people, retaining that talent, and certainly attracting our best minds into the public service.
Let's have a quick look at the Fadden by-election, which is on this Saturday. Keith?
It is, and I'm still traumatised from the last by-election. I was in this studio live on TV when I found out.
Sorry, not sorry, Keith.
Yeah, I know. So can I just say I won't be on the panel for the Fadden by-election.
You coward.
I know, I'm a coward. Look, our candidate, Cameron Caldwell, he lives and works in the Gold Coast. He's a small business operator and a councillor. You never take any election for granted, especially a by-election. So,
and especially one in this circumstance as well.
Yeah, no, of course. So the voters will decide what happens there, and I'll be tuning in with interest.
Michelle, do we need to mention the legendary baseball bat here that voters might be holding?
Well, that might be under their anoraks when they come in to vote. Who knows? But look, it's always been a safe LNP seat. I don't think our prospects are great in that seat. But, you know, we've got a great candidate. She's a local nurse, and she will represent her community with integrity and with energy. And I think with a bit more, certainly on those two fronts, more than what the incumbent gave, who basically cut and ran.
Is that a fair description, cut and run? Keith?
Oh, is that a question for me?
Well, I'm making it one for you.
No, I don't think that's a fair description. So,
But look, I'd expect you to say that. What about the Warrandyte by-election? It's kind of sort of out your way, Keith?
It's mostly out my way.
Yeah.
So 80% of Warrandyte overlaps with Menzies, and I was recently door knocking with our fantastic candidate Nicole Werner in Doncaster East, and it was quite a lot of people home actually on Monday. So I've realised that
Working from home.
That's right. Mondays and Fridays.
That's right.
Are good days to door knock for members of Parliament who are listening.
Oh no! All you working from home, you're now sitting ducks
That's right.
for parliamentarians, for door-to-door salespeople. We got door knocked the other day by a religious person who wanted to convert us. So Monday and Friday, yes.
Yeah, so please be nice to us when we knock on your door, which the people in Doncaster East were. Nicole Werner is a fantastic candidate, and her experience managing a food bank is really timely because the 6 food banks in the seat of Menzies, a few of those overlap with Warrandyte, and they're seeing queues out the door like they've never seen.
I don't think I've got this wrong, Michelle, but I don't think Labor's decided yet whether they're putting up a candidate. Is that right?
I'm going to claim ignorance on this. Again, that list of priorities that I have to get through in my life, this was not on that list. Sorry.
Well, we'll make sure that we give you our list of the things that we'd like you to have a think about before you come on next time. But maybe you can clarify it, Keith. I don't think that Labor's said yet, have they?
Not yet, but
they've got
I'm
weeks.
Sure, I think the person who makes that decision might be on leave, so we'll see if that occurs.
Also, they have a bit of time in which to decide that too. Great to have you both on board this morning, and thanks for being here. Michelle and Nandaraja, we'll try and get you into the studio next time, but good luck. Is still nothing you can tell me about the arts announcement?
No, I think I'll find out in about 5 minutes.
Yeah, I know.
Tune in.
Well, a little early drop here. Okay, not going to happen. Thanks so much. Michelle Anandaraja, who's the Labor member for Higgins, who's in Windsor there because Tony Burke, the Arts Minister, is about to announce something. And Keith Wallahan, great to see you here as well. Come back soon.
Thank you, Virginia. Thank you, Michelle.
I should say that it's very useful that you actually have your own little, zip-up fleecy jacket there with your name, member for Menzies there, and the federal parliament crest on either side as well. I would like to start a movement where all federal parliamentarians walk around in that clobber. That is useful.
I know. I'm not a don't you know who I am person, so I assume people don't know who I am, so I need to wear these things.
Very funny. Keith Wallahan there.